Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to James Cameron.
I almost bailed on being a filmmaker. It's about sitting in that big dark room with all those other people you don't know, and something's going to come up on that screen that's going to take you somewhere.
I'm the king of the world!
Wow, am I excited for today's episode of James Cameron 101. Welcome back. If this is your first time, welcome. I'm your host, Eddie Green. Today we have quite literally two of the podcast's favorite people that have ever been on, and apparently some folks out there as well, because this, I have to give credit where credit's due. This was not my idea. I will not take credit for it. This is from a viewer of the podcast. This was his exact words. "You're on a roll with these episodes, Eddie. Great job having Ed Marsh. Would love to see Van and Ed reunite." And I said, noted. And that was April 6th when I received that message. Here we are, April 25th, a couple weeks later, and that's exactly who we have here on the podcast. Reuniting, I don't know if that's the correct word. We'll see if that's the correct word that we should be using here by Van and Ed, but let's stop dilly-dallying. Let's bring them in. We're going to bring in Mr. Van Ling and, of course, Mr. Ed Marsh.
Hello, Mr. Ling.
Hello, Mr. Marsh.
The advantage is mine.
As it always has been, but not today.
Not today.
So
Once
is
again, we play our most dangerous games.
Indeed.
is the correct word reunite?
I don't know if that's really fair. We are sort of in each other's ether at all times. Van is usually somewhere running on a sub-process in my head backwards. It's a very good thing to do, to be asking yourself at all times, what would Van Ling be doing? And so I would say that is and reunited is not fair. We are in the same physical communication space for the first time in a while.
There we go.
This is true. And that's a testament to actually, how much we have that we're doing independently. But, we've known each other since the mid 80s. And our origin stories are intertwined, I think, to some extent. So, and I have to say, that I am so happy and proud every time I see Ed's name on a movie. Apart from the shrieking jealousy, there's also absolute pride and happiness to see all these great shows that he's working on, which are phenomenal. And they are partially what they are because of people like Ed.
Well, I could say the same thing about Van, who gets deep into the engine room of anything he's involved in. And I'm incredibly proud of the fact that he directed an impressive feature, and I'm looking for his sophomore effort. I hope that comes soon. So, mutual
working
love.
on it.
Yeah.
Any details, Van? Any details on a sophomore?
Not yet. I'm in the midst of writing a number of different things, but I'm actually working on a series pilot that I was working on previously, and that got put on hold for a year, and now I'm just starting in on it a little bit again. So we'll see. It's not Cameron-esque by any means, unfortunately, but it's an interesting thing, and more information as we get to the point where we can talk. But and of course, I see Ed's name everywhere on all these shows. Basically, I look at any blockbuster that comes out in the past couple decades, and I usually find his name involved somewhere in there.
Well, let's not forget Last Action Hero.
Why not?
I'm trying very hard.
Well, listen, we've got to embrace all of these things. I
Sure.
mean, people say the same thing to me about Inclusive Freedom. So it's always interesting because as filmmakers, you are intimately involved in the production of these things, and you can either on the front lines or in the sidelines, from the sidelines, see all the things that went right and all the things that went wrong, and you learn from them. And that's one of the things they taught us in film school, because as much as we talk about, when you make films in school, it's ragtag. You're doing whatever you have to do, and you're pulling off ridiculous stuff, or you're trying ridiculous stuff and failing, but it's still a great learning experience. And there's all these, it's like Mean Girls. There's a lot of different people who want you to succeed and others who want you to fail, and there's competition, and there's all these things. And then you get out in the real world and you start working the movies, and you realize that it's all the same, just with bigger budgets.
Yeah, but I think outside of film school, you get a little kinder to other people because you have a greater understanding of how hard it can be to make anything.
And you're absolutely right. And that's one of the things that we are facing now in the industry. It's become so hard because a lot of things have nothing to do with what we consider, the essence and character of cinema. It's all about everything around it. It's not about how good is the story, how great are the shots, and how well are the actors in performing and inhabiting these characters. A lot of times it's about, what's the premiere going to be like? What do we have to cut together in order to do a big pitch at a trade show? What do we have to do to, deal with all the business aspects of it? And those have always been there. But I think we were lucky to some extent, both of us, in working at Lightstorm with Jim, in that while we did do some of those things, and I'm sure you did so as producer on Ghosts of the Abyss and some stuff that you worked with Jim on that level, but we were fortunate, especially when we were starting out, that we got front row seats to the whole process, and we were uniquely positioned right at Jim's side, which meant that we learned so much more than if we had just been interns, working in the office, and having to, just do office runs and stuff. And you have to kind of learn by osmosis at a distance.
Yeah.
We were right in the middle of it. And, we were fortunate that Jim trusted us to understand what he wanted and be able to help him get that, because that's one of the things that's really, I think, is challenging, because as a filmmaker, you want to trust people, but you also have to take responsibility if you aren't able to get what you need done or communicate properly. And so it's a challenge, because he works on such a higher level in a lot of ways. He's one of those filmmakers who can do everybody's job often better than they can. And that's very daunting. But it's also amazingly impressive and, frankly, for me, aspirational. I don't know how you felt about it, Ed. You've worked with him a lot on,
I would agree, and I would also sort of second your concept that we learned a ton just by being right on the front lines. I will always cherish look, the job itself was boring. Underwater video tap operator on the Abyss. Okay, rolling, record, and cut, stop. Let's see that back, rewind, play. That was the physical job. And then obviously being able to find things for reference when things were shot out of sequence or whatever. So I had to keep records, all that stuff. But I was there for the play-by-play. I was on the headset. I heard everything James Cameron said, even when he was off mic to the rest of the world. That's just how the communication system was set up. So I'm looking through the same camera he's looking through, and I'm hearing his thoughts combined with some very unpleasant breathing sounds. But I did form a very strong sort of virtual Cameron for at least his aesthetic at that time. And the language he uses when communicating with camera or just talking to actors, to a certain extent, is language that stays with me. I actually found myself working on a post-fish shot 3 or 4 days ago, and I was having to move the camera, and when they hit the right point, I found myself saying woof. And I actually sort of shook myself, because that was something that Jim would do. That was his way of sort of acknowledging that's the spot. You're in the right spot. So that's that's ingrained to the point that I don't think it could be extracted if I wanted it to be.
Well, it sounds like it's a beneficial thing, though. That's
Yeah, most of the time.
So, I would love to just kind of take my camera off here and just kind of let you guys roll with the punches here, but I think that would be doing you both a disservice here. I kind of want to, if I may, steer this in some kind of a direction. We'll it's obviously very loose, and we can converse. But yesterday, I had the opportunity to have Darren Doctorman on the podcast, and both of your names came up, and I was like, well, that's just serendipitous, because tomorrow I am doing a podcast with them. So for anyone who may or may not have checked out both of your appearances, Van, your multiple appearances on this podcast, can you summate your origin story for me?
But before we do that, can I steal some of Darren's thunder?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. He hasn't been on yet, has he?
Oh, he was on yesterday. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Did he do a Captain Kirk imitation?
He did. Yeah.
Okay.
It is inevitable, like the tide.
Yes. I do one Captain Kirk imitation, and it's actually an imitation of Darren Doctorman imitating Captain Kirk. It's his one-word Captain Kirk imitation. Companion. Thank you very much.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, we've all pretty much we all do Kirk the way Darren does Kirk, because that was one of the amazing things. And I'm sure he told you his origin story, at least in regards to me.
With the power loader.
Well, prior to the power loader, did he tell you how we met? We, all three of us, Darren, Ed, and myself, were all at different levels at the USC School for Cinema and Television in the mid '80s, and I was class of '86, and Ed was class of '87. Sorry, yeah. 87.
Yeah, I stayed an extra year and rated the graduate program of all the classes I wanted to take. But yes,
very cool. Okay, and then Darren was classless, because the gag was he had been trying to get into the film school forever, and even had letters of recommendation from us, all the students who were rooting for him, and he never got in. And it has not hurt him one bit. He saved a lot more money than we ever did. But we've all stayed fast friends for decades. And he is now the premier Kirk guy. As a matter of fact, he shepherds, William Shatner at some of the Star Trek events and works with them. So, he found his niche, or created it, which was amazing.
Yeah. I'm sure he talked about Inglorious Trexperts, which is one of his ongoing podcast efforts in relationship to Star Trek.
I know he has a podcast. I don't know the name of it. Is that the name of it?
Yeah, the Inglorious Trexperts.
That's one of the podcasts he does. He also does one called Weirded Beardos, in which he and Kirk Thatcher of Punk on the Bus in Star Trek 4 fame do together. Mm-hmm. So he's done a lot of these things. So.
Yeah, he was just, I mean, all of you are such treats to have on, and just to hear the stories, obviously come to realize, having talked to him yesterday, The Abyss was really just like a one and done kind of thing for him in terms of Cameron. But obviously Ed and yourself, Van, you both have continued or had continued with Cameron after The Abyss. And I just kind of want to figure out, after The Abyss, where does Ed and Van, where do you go from there, and how do you come back together? I'm curious how that what the timeline is, I guess, for both of you.
Oh goodness. You don't want us to tell the power loader story? I mean, I think we've touched on it already in the podcast, or at least I did.
Been told ad infinitum.
Yeah. I was going to say, I've heard the power loader story.
I will say one thing, Van. I heard you telling it at one point, and you said that I challenged you to a bet. I honestly don't remember challenging you to a bet. I just remember me saying, you love that, build it as a resume piece. That's my memory.
Yeah,
But
yeah, that is pretty much. It was very casual, but it became one of those things of, you know, you know, you should try to get it to. You're out of focus, by the way, Ed.
yeah, that happens
You,
with the camera.
yeah,
I'm not sure how to. I'm going to turn it off and
well,
turn it on again for a second. Hold on. Just keep going.
yeah. You had essentially, uh, challenged me to do it. And it wasn't, it wasn't like a huge bet, but it was a gentleman's bet where it's like, let's see if you can have it ready for Eating Fest,
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
which was the thing. So I kind of took it as a friendly challenge and something that would actually goad me into not being lazy and actually do it. There you go.
There we go. Just
Now
change
you're
it.
focused. Yeah. So that's kind of how I saw it from my standpoint, because it was one of those things like you've always done. You've always challenged me in multiple ways to better myself. And one of the cool things about film school is that there is a way to have competition that isn't toxic, where you kind of just you're cheering your friends on, and you're happy when they achieve all these different things, and and it spurs you on and inspires you to do things that you're trying to do. And that's one of the great things that that was part of our relationship, certainly.
Yeah.
It still is, as far as I can tell.
Yeah. Among my earliest memories, I was in my first year at USC, and Van was taking the class that's known as 290, which is the first time you make films in film school. Essentially, you make a short film every 2 to 3 weeks, I forget, and it's presented in front of the class. And then you make 5 in the semester, so there's not a lot of time to hone or revisit, and you're just sort of calibrating how you communicate with the world and how people respond to what you're doing. And Van was making a film, a very ambitious film about an evil puppy kicker. And I was cast as the evil puppy kicker. So I'd played soccer in high school, and at that time I still had a somewhat of a soccer body, and we spent a lot of time pretending to kick puppies. No foot actually contacted puppy flesh, but it was a very successful illusion at the end of the day.
Is this on YouTube, Van?
Oh God, no. This was it would be taken out of context, unfortunately. It was done as a comedy, obviously. It was it was basically a parody or a spoof of the idea of the hunt for the tactical team that's put together to take on a mad killer kind of story, except it was about a puppy kicker.
Right.
And I remember we were using all the tricks we could think of, which, without ever touching or hurting a dog.
Mhm.
And it was, my favorite was still, we did a shot where he comes on like a shark chasing this dog and kicks and pretends to kick the puppy, and we just have this shot on Ed where he's going that was still a classic for me. So we kind of really meshed, because anybody who's willing to say, oh, you want me to play a mad puppy kicker? Sure, I'll do that. And that's kind of one of the things that we kind of got to do. And we were in the same programs. There was a program at the school that we had been in called Thematic Option, and we both were in that program at different years, but that was a bond. Being in USC was a bond. Being in USC Film School was a bond. So we would work on each other's projects where we could, and what everybody does in film school, that's where you meet people, because the socialization process is probably the most important thing you learn from film school, that you don't get from just watching YouTube and reading magazines or books about how movies are made. It's the social aspect of it. And I was there to learn everything from Ed, because he was very social, very smart, very capable of those things. I was a little more reserved, I think, even though I was a year older. I don't know if that's how you remember it, Ed.
No, I mean, I don't think of you as reserved. Honestly, you were doing your own thing, and you were ambitious in your own ways. Your 310 was an action set piece in a way that no one else's was. So many, that's the next level of production class. You're going to hear a lot of numbers if you talk to USC people long enough, 290, 310, 480.
Yep.
But a lot of 310s are basically about people who are trying to have relationships, and Van staged an entire futuristic heist set in a future where license plates were barcodes, and this, I believe, was before Back to the Future, if I remember correctly. And just very well storyboarded, very well staged. It was consummate action done very, very well, and on a cheap budget. So,
well, I'm sure we'll come back to the timeline question. No, but two questions. One, what was the grade on the puppy kicker? Do you remember?
Oh gosh, not that great. I mean, I was really learning a lot of different things about filmmaking, and you try to do some things that are dramas, do some things that are just crazy, do some things that are funny, and mostly it's a question of, can you tell a story, and can you evoke whatever emotions you're trying to evoke? And it was a lot of fun. It's the time to test out and try things, and that's the fun of that, because once you get into the next level of class, these were all Super 8s. You were responsible for everything on doing it, shooting it, editing it, you weren't technically supposed to have sync sound. You could play music along with it, but you couldn't have sync sound, so you couldn't have dialogue. They wanted to get you to teach you how to tell stories visually, because that's ultimately what cinema is about. Interestingly enough, I also learned a lot in college about how to tell stories through audio only, because of Ed. Because one of the things he also did in the midst of film school, everything else, he also wrote a radio play, and was doing it at the USC student radio station. And I got to work on that. It was University of the Damned, which was a lot of fun as well, and that's part of Ed's creativity. It spills over greater than cinema, and it's one of those things where if you don't have avenues of getting out your creativity just with what's in the film school, you can do extracurricular. And we both did a lot of stuff outside of the film school, because we were in this other program called the Associated Trustee Scholars. And that was really cool, because a lot of the folks, I don't know if this was your experience, Ed, but a lot of the folks we dealt with in film school, they didn't even like being at USC. They begrudgingly were at USC because it had the best film school. And so they stayed involved only in the film school stuff. They wouldn't go anywhere else on campus, really, unless it was like using it as a location to shoot things. And so they weren't, I feel, as well-rounded. They may have been more obsessed and more focused on the film school stuff, but we were young. We were there learning life. And so being part of the university as a whole, and being involved with trustee scholars and with the thematic option program and all those things, were really important for us.
Yeah, I would agree. I think there might be one key difference in that we were both in the undergrad program. So
Yes.
we were there for a 4-year stint, including basically the general degree requirements beyond our major. But a lot of the students in the film school were graduate students, so they were already broke from having paid for 4 years of college, and then had to find a way to pay for 2 more, and it was a very specific focus. So I think at that point they were allowed to ignore some of the trappings of what we enjoyed about USC.
True.
Just, one perspective. What was the question?
Oh, it was a silly question, but I have a serious question. It's Cameron obviously has he's publicly said it's knowledge he did not go to film school, and look at what his career turned into. Both of you did go to film school, and look at where you are in I mean, you're both vets of the business. So the question is film school necessary?
Not necessary, but I think Van touched on this, in that if you go to a film school and the program is set up properly, you are forging relationships that you can trust when you get out of film school. I have Van to thank for my career, because I was temping at a temp agency. I was working at Disney, but I was a temp filling in for various receptionists. when the opportunity to join the Abyss came through, I take some credit for Van's career because I told him to build the resume piece that ended up being the power loader that got him to meet Galen Hurd, etc. So it is sort of a vacuum genesis, in lack of a better term. But it's indicative of what friends and people you trust come out of that experience. Because when you get out into the real world and you need someone to do a job, you're going to go to the people you trust. You're going to be less inclined to hire someone who you've just shaken hands with. You're going to want to know what they were like. And in the post-production building at 4 a.m, when you were at the nadir of your energy and your creativity, and suddenly someone came in and said, try that take, or who wants pizza, or whatever. And it's just the camaraderie of that experience and the shared ethos of having shared the learning experience and the communication skills that you got from working on those different films that make that person a trustworthy choice to try and bring onto a project in the real world.
This absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's the main thing you get. And, if you take a college tour, and I have 2 kids, and so I've been to like 30 different college tours, every single college says, and you'll also benefit from what we call, insert the college name here, mafia. When you get out of school, you'll have this network of people who will help you find employment in the job you want. And you sort of roll your eyes when you hear it. And I don't care if the school has a mafia. I want to know the goons who are in that school, because they're the ones who are going to have the friends who are in the school at the same time. And that's the mafia. It's not like you're going to be able to contact an alumni and get a job instantly. Perhaps that's possible. I never took advantage of that. But it was the people who you were with who were the substrate of your professional development.
Yeah, Ed's absolutely right about that. That being said, the alumni issue, there is some benefit if they also went to USC Film School, because then that's part and parcel of what Ed's talking about. There's that instant camaraderie, and if you have any overlap with students or with professors at the university, it helps because you can both reminisce about something. That's an instant bond there.
Yeah.
So, but ultimately, what it comes down to is you have to take the initiative when you're there to do those things. There are some folks who are very artsy and they had their own thing, but they were in their own heads. And so they might make brilliant films, but they would be making them alone because they weren't, kind of talking with people and doing things. And so if I may quote the great Tom Lehrer, life is like a sewer. What you get out of it depends on what you put into it. And that's kind of the truth of the matter. You gain benefits from helping somebody else on their film, learning and being somebody for them to bounce ideas off of. And Ed and I kind of bonded instantly and we're very different people in many ways. And we've also built a whole group of folks that we stay in touch with from those days. And, we work with them, we commiserate with them, we do all of those things. That's really what you get out of it. And the film business is kind of like that in many aspects.
Yeah, I would agree. The metaphor I like to use is that the film industry is a little bit like a carnival, and you have a role in that carnival. You might be the bearded lady, you might be the fire eater, but ultimately that carnival is going to disband, and you're going to hop on a train, going to go to a new city, and you're going to join a new carnival, and you might be the flame eater for that carnival. And the thing is, there's only so many carnies, and you'll be amazed how often you run into people who you haven't seen maybe for 30, 35 years who are now on the show you're with, and then you get to reminisce about what happened back then and tell new stories, etc. So it is a continuum. If you work on films, you will have people who I never say goodbye when I finish a job. I always say see you at some point, because it is a situation where you will almost always invariably come around and work with someone a second time.
Wow. So it's safe to say Cameron is he's the rare exception, right? He didn't.
That was your original question. He went to a film school. It was called Roger Corman, Action International Pictures or American International Pictures. What was the name of Corman's outfit?
New World Pictures.
New World
Pictures.
Yeah. Because it was very much a situation where he was given a playground and people to develop with, and he had an innate talent, no question, and he was already an artist. He was an excellent illustrator and an artist, and he basically expanded those skill sets through those films.
He used to tell a story about before he worked with Roger. He and got a group of dentists to invest in doing a little short called Xenogenesis, and it was the first thing he had tried to do with a 35 millimeter camera. They had rented a 35 millimeter camera and spent the entire first day trying to figure out how to use it, and then creating this thing. And that piece, I think, was one of the ones that impressed Corman enough to hire him to work on visual effects there. So he was a bootstrap guy, and he's like, if I don't have that knowledge and I can't obtain it by going to college, because college is expensive and takes up time, and I'm going to figure out how to do it myself. He was a trucker. He was driving school lunches, and in his spare time driving, he'd be thinking about all these things. That's one of the reasons why, if you notice all the character names in The Abyss, a lot of the names in some of his movies come from places in California that he would drive through. Vasquez was named after Vasquez Rocks. Gorman, Bishop, those are all towns in California along the central highway routes. So it's really interesting. Yeah, he came up through a different thing than us, but at the same time, I think he saw in both Ed and I people who didn't come out of film school with only I'm out of film school, somebody hand me a film to direct. He saw that we had, I guess, some of the same scrappy energy that he had, and he appreciated that enough that he certainly worked with us for a fair amount of time. I remember one of the big things that happened on T2. Ed was basically doing behind the scenes video and stuff like that, and we had shot scenes for the police assault on the Cyberdyne building, and there was a point at which the question was, how do they know they're out there? How do they know the police are out there while they're setting explosives and everything inside the building? And they said, well, we just gotta we need to shoot this bit where they're looking at the video monitors. And it was like, well, what are we going to do? We can't use any of the footage from the film because those are cinematic shots. They don't look like a video monitor, a surveillance monitor. And Ed had his behind the scenes stuff he was shooting, and we ended up using one of the behind the scenes shots where he shot a rehearsal of all the cops driving into the parking lot that we used as the video tap, that we put in the security camera shot insert for the show, and it helped tell the story. And that only worked because I think Ed was shooting this stuff kind of cinematically, and while still doing documentary style. And that's one of the things that made, I think, us being of use to Cameron when we were working on these shows.
I want to piggyback on that story. In that same scene, when they drive the truck into Cyberdyne, smashing through the glass, if I remember correctly, when Arnold comes in, they needed a prop surveillance camera because they didn't want to destroy a real one. And Van, with consummate model making skills, sat down with maybe, I don't know, 10 square inches of foam core and modeled what looked like an exact replica of the security camera that they didn't want to destroy, and mounted it. And sure enough, the truck hits it, dings it, and it's gone. But he spent a solid, I want to say, 2 hours making that perfect, and no one would ever question it. And that's a kind of resourcefulness that you don't find in everyone either.
Well, this is the thing. One of the things I think I certainly learned this from Jim, and you may have as well, which is that he's the kind of guy who can do everybody's job better than they can, and but he doesn't necessarily lord that over people, but it is a pressure to do your job as well as you can.
Yep.
And he's the kind of guy who will get down, on his knees and help you get something done, because he's doing it for his film. He's not like yelling at you to just get your job done, and
Right.
he's waiting on you. He's the kind of person, certainly at least in those days, where he was willing to just get there and help out. I remember on Titanic, the few weeks I was down there, and seeing him on the was this, or maybe this was a story that came from one of your video interviews, Ed, about Jim asking somebody to clean the floor of the grand staircase set, because it's supposed to be a brand new ship and it shouldn't look weathered or anything, and the floor was all smudged up and dirty, and he kept calling for somebody to clean this up. This is supposed to be a brand new ship, guys. And I guess they didn't move fast enough, and he came out and started swabbing the decks himself.
Quite likely. I don't remember that story specifically, but it's certainly within character.
That may have come from the interview with Francis Fisher. I'm trying to remember now.
That could have been.
But it was one of those things. He cares about the film so much, his storytelling and what he's trying to do so much, and all he expects is that everybody else care about it as much as he does.
Yeah.
Which generally doesn't happen. But if you can come close and help him get things that he's trying to do, then he sees somebody who's, I'm not going to say his tribe, but at least has the thinking that he appreciates.
Yeah, I would agree. He had this phrase, I don't know if he still uses it, but when things weren't happening at a pace that he was happy with, he would basically ask the assistant director or whoever he needed work from a very specific question. And it would start with, is it too much to ask? He would start a sentence with, is it too much to ask that we get this rehearsal off before lunch? Or is it too much to ask that we move that condor that I asked to have moved 20 minutes ago, or whatever? And it's a very disarming psychological approach, because in your head, you're saying, well, no, I guess it's not too much to ask. I guess that means I better move the condor. And it's a very specific sort of motivational technique, which I latched onto and remember fondly, because when he got to the if it's too much to ask stage, then you knew that people needed to start to pick up their game.
Did either of you come into contact with Roger Corman?
I did not.
You did not, Van?
No, I think I met him once at something, but no, not really.
Yeah, he didn't go to proper film school, but then when you said he did go to a different kind of film school, that's always what I hear when anyone talks about Corman. It's he was a film school. Like that's always the analogy that's used. And
well, when you don't have a salary, all you can rely on for the energy is passion.
Right.
And so
fear. Don't forget fear.
Fear too. But the story I don't know if I told this story or if other people told this story about, I think it was on Galaxy of Terror Jim was working on, and he was like trying to shoot some inserts as a second unit director, on a Roger Corman film, which is kind of like saying anybody in the office who has the time should be able to do this. And he had to do an insert of some maggots. And he had set up a shot, got some real maggots. They put them in the shot there, and you put maggots under hot lights, they go to sleep because it's hot. And it's like, well, they're not moving around. How are we going to do this? And Jim came up with this idea of, give me an extension cord. He cuts the end off of it, plugs it in, sprinkles some water down where the maggots are, and puts the electrical thing in, plug in, and so it was like, and action, plug in, they start squirming because there's getting electric current, and it's like, that looks right, okay, and cut, and they cut, and they go back to calming down because they don't have electric current running through them. And supposedly the story goes that some investors for Corman or somebody were walking through, and they watched him do this, and action, plugs in, and the maggots move, and cut, and they stop moving. And they were real magnets. And somebody just said, wow, now that's a director. I don't know if that's true or if it's just apocryphal, but it sounds totally in character.
It does. Have you seen Xenogenesis, Eddie?
Oh, I have. It is even in 2025, it blows me away in terms of what he could do, what that team could do.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I find interesting about it is just how many tropes became part of Cameron's professional oeuvre later. I mean, you have elements of the hunter killers, I think they're called.
Yeah.
You have elements of the power loader and the machine that the woman wields against the robots. The concept art shows a woman whose mind is sort of connected to some sort of neural network, which is very sort of avatarish, if you will. There are all sorts of things that he has managed to continue to sort of work with creatively from that seed, that very old seed.
And the sense of a strong female character as the protagonist is another thing.
Yeah.
That was always a part of it. He had a wonderful mom that we met a number of times, and she really instilled, I think, this sense of respect and things for women that I saw that came through in a lot of his films.
Yeah. Yeah. That's something it is on YouTube. That's how I saw it, but it's in a really grainy kind of VHS static version. Like I really hope it gets, I don't know, some kind of a restoration. It's like I said, in 2025, I see shots in there and I have no idea how it was accomplished in the 70s, let alone if I couldn't even do it today, and there's so much more available, but it's absolutely mind-blowing.
It was done optically or in camera. That's the truth of the matter. And I don't know how many people today even know how that stuff works. Ed, you work in so many different projects now with all different kinds, and you come from the same age I did, which is visual effects were things that you had to do in a lab at a visual effects facility that was all photochemical. And how things have changed now, yet how much of things still remain the same in terms of mindset. I don't know if that's still the case.
Yeah, I think so. I sort of avoided that professional transition from film to digital because I was doing behind the scenes during most of it. But it's very much a situation where as soon as we got out of school, they started to take the film tools away. And it's like, oh, we're not, oh, this isn't Avid. We're okay. Well, that's kind of like the Edidroid. We took a class in Edidroid. So we understand nonlinear editing. Okay, so now everything's digital. Oh wait, but not for Christopher Nolan. You mean I have to remember how the key numbers work again? And so I think we were right at the sweet stage to sort of help resurrect film before the science died out entirely. I still feel like a gray beard when I handle film, and there are people younger than me who do it, but it's a rarer breed these days than it should be. But it's also cyclical because a lot of people are discovering the fun of shooting film, the discipline of shooting film, the ridiculous amount of latitude that negative has, so that you can shoot things that you could have shot it digitally, but it's almost better for having passed through film. I don't know where I'm going with this. I've lost.
Well, film also kind of initiates a discipline because it's a finite resource.
Yes.
You can't you run out of film on a set, you can't shoot anymore. Nowadays, you can have a pocket full of SD cards, SSD cards, and all sorts of things, and you can shoot on forever. And in those days, you only have X amount of film to get it right.
Right.
And therefore, the amount of discipline is so different. You're not rolling constantly. Every take has to be measured. And those kind of things, really make teach a different style.
I agree.
It means that intention is really important. It's not just, we're going to film it 20 different ways because we can just let the camera run and then we'll figure out the footage afterwards. Because you needed to know what you wanted and do it economically.
Yes.
And when we were we were both at the cusp of the adoption of the Avid and computers into the film business, in the sense that we got to see one of the greatest proponents of what it could do. And it wasn't to be lazy, it was to be able to do more. That's really what Jim was trying to do with a lot of these tools. And the Edit Droid that we both took a class on as an evening class, they were trying to see, hey, and it was a laser disc based, not hard disk based system.
Eddie, do you know what we're talking about?
Laserdisc?
Okay, so
the Edit
let's
Droid.
back up a tiny bit. The Edit Droid was invented by George Lucas and his people because he did not like how long it took to find a roll of film, roll it down onto rewinds, and cut out the piece you need, and then assemble it onto a chem. He just felt his life draining away from him, and he knew that random access memory was possible if you could have multiple copies of the same dailies. So imagine loading 3 to 8 machine controllable laser discs with the same set of 30 minutes of dailies. So you're working on this scene. So you load all the dailies for that scene, and it's the same set of footage on each
multiple machines.
Okay. So that now when you are playing, you can set up a virtual timeline that says, okay, I want to play this clip, then I want to play this clip. And the computer goes through and says, all right, well, I can sequence this laserdisc to come in with this clip at the right time. I can sequence this laserdisc to come in at this clip at the right time. So you're basically pre-orchestrating nonlinear editing so that when you hit play, each of those 3 to 6 to 12, I don't know how many they ultimately used, 3 was like the minimum, would allow you to watch a sequence in real time with cuts.
Wow.
Yeah, the challenge really was if you had all of your dailies on one disc, because usually they were, let's say you were doing a scene, the dailies probably aren't going to be more than half an hour, depending if it's like a talking scene. But if you want to cut between, okay, we shot a close-up of this character and we shot a close-up of this character, but all your dailies were on the same disc, or on the same tape or on the same reel, which is what it was back in the day with the film, you couldn't jump from a piece that's near the head of the disc or of the reel to a piece that's later without cutting them out and splicing them together.
Right.
Okay, but the time it takes to cut them out and splice them together was so long, you'd maybe lose the rhythm of what you were trying to cut. That's why nonlinear became a thing. The first way they tried to do nonlinear was exactly as Ed described. Multiple laser discs that were still linear discs. It was, play this take and then the next take and then the next take and then the next take. But if you want to cut between takes, the only way you could have it is you have multiple discs. And it would say, play timecode this to timecode this on disc A, and then jump to timecode this and this on disc B. They were already spinning. It was much faster. That was the idea behind nonlinear. And then now that you do it with a computer, all the data is accessible almost instantaneously. That was the start of it. And the Edit Droid actually was bought up and became the Avid Media Composer. And
throw away the laserdisc, replace it with fast enough hard drives, and you essentially have exactly what they're doing now.
Yeah, and that's the way it worked. Ed, have you seen this film that Walter Murch did recently?
Oh, the Moviola. Her name was Moviola.
Her name is Moviola.
I haven't seen it yet, but I'm definitely going to.
It's great, and this is the great Walter Murch, of course, editor extraordinaire, Apocalypse Now, all these different things. And he was basically showing the new generations in this recent documentary what it was like to cut on film. And all the stages of what you do from the time you get the negative to you have to break down the negative into scenes. You have to mark the scenes. You have to mark the sync points at the slate when they click so that you sync the sound up, which was on a separate set of reels. They had to print the sound onto mag reels that had film sprockets so that it would line up with the film picture that had sprockets. And it was this whole process. Now, how do you keep track of all this? How do you keep track of it when you edit? Because there's 16 frames of 35 millimeter film image per foot. And what if, how do you, do that? And you have to print numbers on the film to sync up. It was this incredible process that required a ridiculous amount of math and discipline in your head to be able to do this. And every time you'd make it, you'd have these huge logbooks that you had to make with, you know, all the different takes on all the different, broken down by days and shots and takes. And you'd have these huge binders of logs. So then when somebody says, oh, you know, something in one of the later takes on this for the close-up, we got a really good moment, let's find that. You sit there and look through the thing, figure out, oh, it was on this roll and the key numbers for that are this and this. And then you have to go find the reel, and then you take it out, you cut that piece out, and you put it on, and you tape it to the piece before it. That's what it took to make a cut. It was amazing. It was having to think and tell stories in slow motion while holding all that stuff. And what the new technology has done is made it possible to do it closer to real time. You know, it almost became more like live television. All right, cut to camera 3, cut to camera 4. And that was one of the huge things that happened. And Jim was at the forefront of that. He adopted the Avid relatively quickly.
On True Lies, if I remember correctly.
Fully on True Lies, but we
tested.
No, we didn't use it on Terminator 2 except for the making of for the Laserdisc I did. But we did use it to do portions of the Abyss Special Edition in '92.
Okay.
And that's we had managed to get because we made some inroads in with Avid to, you know, and they said, hey, you know, Jim Cameron wants to try out our equipment here, we'll send it to you. And so we were able to learn on the Avid for the first time at Lightstorm. And so, you know, I ended up getting, Casey and I ended up getting our own Avid for our little business a couple of years later. And we've been Avid people ever since.
Right.
Do you work on Avid still, Ed, or do you?
Yes, pretty much exclusively. DaVinci Resolve is making inroads, but Avid is still the lingua franca for when you're on a large project that's shared by a lot of people. So that will change one day unless Avid really picks up its game. But so far, it has the familiarity, and it's definitely the most robust in my opinion. I can remember the very first time I was shown an Avid, and I sort of knew that it was based on EditDroid, and it was Jim. He wanted me to cut a trailer for True Lies. And so he sat me down and he said, this is the Avid. Have you worked with this yet? And I said, no, but I understand it's non-linear. I sort of get the sense of it. And he said, well, what you do is you just sort of throw everything you think you want to need into a timeline and just use that big ball as how you go through the material. And then you can just sort of cut as you want. And the assistant editors were like, no. Because even though it was nonlinear, you still had issues of management and keeping track of where things were, et cetera. It's gotten much better and much more fluid. The big ball of footage approach to editing is definitely something you can do these days, but it wasn't something that they were embracing yet.
To be fair, that is how I edit, actually.
Yeah. It's not uncommon. I mean, you become familiar with that timeline, and it's very easy to figure out where things are. And the beauty of all of these tools is if they're designed well, you do not have to change how you think. You adapt to the machine to how you think. And that to me is a successful computer tool, when it changes the way it works to accommodate how you think. And for a long time, computers just didn't have that alacrity, and now they do.
Yeah, it all comes down to the man drives the machine, not the other way around. But there were a lot of people who looked at it that way. I remember one of our mutual friends who's a wonderful editor, Caroline Ross. She was our big sister for both of us in the Trustee Scholars, and she went on to be this amazing editor, moving up from assistant editor to full editor, and she worked with us on some of Cameron's movies, and she used to talk about the fact that the nonlinear thing was fantastic for being able to do things a lot quicker, a lot faster, and you know, but it also made it possible for producers to come in and say, well, you know, I want to see a different version of it. I want to work with you and have somebody cut. And she was saying, I love the fact that we can cut so quickly, but I don't want to have to stay late to cut the producer's girlfriend's version of this just because we can. And he's showing off to her by giving her, or somebody outside of the project, the ability to play in that play in that toy box, because it wastes the time of the people who are on the clock trying to actually do the project. So it's one of those things where it's a power that you shouldn't abuse. Use it for what you're supposed to be using it for. And if it's, if it's for playtime, there's certain aspects of that. Yeah, you can get some great ideas by trying things out non-destructively with the editing systems. But focus it on the task at hand. That's what it's great for.
Is it, since we're on this topic, do either of you or both of you maybe feel that a lot of people would argue that film editing is the potentially maybe the most crucial element of any film's success? Putting a film together is you can make or break a film just in the edit. Do both of you agree with that?
Well, the common joke is we'll save it in the editing, and then the joke after that is we'll save it in the projection. And then the final joke is we'll save it in the time it takes the light to reflect off the scene before it hits people's eyeballs. I'm very much comfortable with editing. It to me is my style of creativity. I consider myself to have a reactive creativity. I can shoot. I can definitely get a camera out and I can tell a story. I can set a scene, but I am more comfortable with the quote unquote fixed problem set of this is the footage and this is the goal. And how do you best manipulate the footage to get to that goal? And it's a combination of editing and storytelling, and sound is a big part, visual effects is a big part. You can't separate one process from the rest, and each augments what you are trying to do in a way that it suffers if you don't have the other. I mean, technically, yes, you could tell a story without visual effects, but most of the stories that people seem to be interested in benefit from things that we can do in visual effects, even if it's just slightly pacing up a performance through a little change of timing that allows you to just sort of get to the reaction a little bit faster. That's technically a visual effect. So
yeah, there's a lot of absolutely editing. I love editing. It's one of my favorite portions of filmmaking, partially because it's where you can kind of compensate, fix, or solve or augment all the limitations of what you went through in the actual production process. And it's really important to get, because you're bounded by time and space when it comes to shooting production, because it's such a big to do, and so many people, and all of them have to do their jobs right. It's like choreographing. Every shot is choreographing a huge dance move with a bunch of different performers, and all of them have to be at the right place, on rhythm, at the right time. And that doesn't often happen in a lot of cases, because there's just so many factors, things that can go wrong. This was late because there was a flood, because there was traffic, because there was this. And you have to, as a director, you have to constantly be improvising. And if you've tried to design out everything, it's really hard it's easier to improvise, but it drives you crazy, because if you plotted out everything just perfectly and then have it all go to hell when you're trying to do it, and then you go into post is where you redeem the project. Post in editing in particular is where you think, shoot, I didn't get that on set. How do I get it now? Do I do a reshoot? Do I do an insert? What are the things we can do to help solve these narrative issues, these emotional issues, whatever it is? And that's why I love editing, because one of the things we learned in film school is the power of being able to do that. Whether it was talking about Kuleshov or Eisenstein or any of these old Russian film theories, you learn so much from what you could do, and you can surprise people. And just having footage, that's one of the things. I took an editing class at USC that was taught by the gentleman who was Robert Wise's editor, Thomas Stanford.
Thomas Stanford, yeah.
And he was talking about how you can, what you have is you now control time and space. You can, make it look completely different and tell the story completely differently than what was in the footage, if you know how to do it or if you have to do it. I mean, obviously you shouldn't have to. It should be, I've got all the materials I need to tell the emotionally engaging whatever, but sometimes you're missing something. Is there a way you can cut it together with what you have without shooting anything else? Or can you reduce it down to only needing to shoot this one little thing, one little insert? It's amazing what you can do in editing. It's the most powerful part, in my mind, of what you can do. And it's the one where you kind of wield the most power in terms of being able to help guide the story or help it, get by things that you would never have thought when you shot it. Oh man, I came out of this, we didn't get these takes. How are we going to tell the story? It's like, well, my editor will figure it out. And they usually do. And they come down to, okay, all we need, I pulled this shot from this other scene of this person's reaction, and that's all we need to show. And it'll sell exactly what we're missing here. And now we have the ability, when I edit, I go through the process of sitting down and going, okay, I got exactly what I needed from a performance here, but it's in the wrong location or the wrong lighting. And I can now fix that with visual effects or with color timing, grading and everything. And so it really is where you finish telling your story, is with editorial. And then with sound, people really, I think, underestimate the power and the value of sound. Where you can suddenly you shot in a dark, scary room for a horror movie, and it's scary because it's dark. But once you put in the sounds of dripping water and was that a footstep or any of those other things, you suddenly create a whole world for the audience that they don't have to see, because their mind is putting it together from what they hear. And it's this amazing ability to manipulate time and space in the post process. And I agree with Ed. That's my favorite part of it too.
Now, Cameron is also in a very unique position because he's one of the rare directors, filmmakers that you'll see credited as an editor on some of his films. Titanic, Avatar, I believe he's credited as editor. Like that's one of the, but I always hear other filmmakers, directors that'll say, yeah, like I went into the, I was editing this, but you never see them credited as editor. Why is that?
Well, there are levels of editing, and certainly it's common for the director to basically sit with the editor on a couch in the background as the editor presents the scene, and the director will say, oh, I want to try and pace that up, or do we have another take? But the editor's sort of a creative equal with the director, and the director can walk away, can start to plan his next film. But the editor's there and has to stay with it from start to finish. Gotcha. The editor will be dealing with the composer. The editor will be dealing with the color timing, but doing everything. And some directors are less involved in that process than others. Jim sits on the machine. He will watch the dailies. He will do his own assembly. In the case of Avatar, I would argue that he's editing when he's constructing every single angle. He's ex post facto directing, figuring out where the camera goes and figuring out what the cut points are going to be. It's an editing process that gets subsumed into the overall, please pardon the term, mise en scène. So he deserves the editor credit because he puts in the time. He will sit there on the machine constructing a scene without having to talk to another editor, without having to talk to someone else. I've seen him disappear into a room for a day and come out and have a sequence ready to show. And it's always very polished and always very good. Is it the final? No. Sometimes other ideas come, and he's open to other ideas, but he at least got to do his first take on what he thought he saw from the footage that he shot.
Yeah, and it's a better way for him to be able to kind of get across what he's trying to do. Sometimes it's the rough, and you go, oh, so what you were trying to do is you're trying to put the emphasis on this character for this scene. Because there's sometimes a dozen different ways to cut things. And he wants to cut to the chase. It's like, yeah, we can take all the time to explore, but with his films, he's usually under the gun because, the equipment's only available for so long, and we're burning daylight on this or whatever. And so he's like, let me get to what I want, or at least to show you what I'm trying to achieve. And now you're able to, get on board my bus and we're all moving towards the same direction, you know. So I mean, he has a different way of working than some other directors. A lot of the older directors are like, I've shot the film, all the material's there, it's now up to you to make it, to tell that story, and they've moved on to another show. In the old days, I've been watching a lot of older movies lately, and that was the process. And because of that, I think a lot of people were under the impression, oh, the editor just cuts out the bad stuff and puts the film together. And the power of time and space that an editor has. Ed is really like Mike Jutlov's Wizard of Speed and Time. He really can control all of those different aspects as an editor, and it's, to me, the most creative and the most important thing, because it's not bound as much by limitations as you would think.
Wow. Well, look, we just passed an hour. I kind of want to keep it right around here. And seriously, I had no idea where the conversation would lead. But I'm happy with where it did go, because I think we covered some pretty in-depth kind of niche-y stuff, and that stuff kind of gets my bumps goosing. But I do want to. Ed's like, what? But I do want to ask this one final question. Speaking of edits, putting you both on the spot, can either of you name one of your all-time favorite film edits from any film, just any film at all?
The cliched one, of course, is 2001, when the jawbone goes in the air and becomes a spaceship, because it's a very clear way of explaining the power of editing. That cut explains so much, while still being incredibly poetic. So I'm going to start with that, and hopefully I've bought Van some time so he can think about the one he wants to share, and then I'll try and come up with another one that isn't quite so cliched.
Van?
Well,
I know, putting on the spot.
That is a really tough one, because there are so many fantastic edits and things. My favorite edits, frankly, are some of the ones that are the most unexpected. Because they're based on this weird film theory. One of the things harking back to the point I made earlier about Russian filmmakers back in the 20s, the teens and 20s, and there was a guy we learned about, was Kuleshov. Was that the name?
Kuleshov.
He did this experiment in which he took this picture of an old man, wizened old face, with a neutral expression on it. And what he did was he edited it right after showing an image of some kind of emotional import. For instance, a loaf of bread or a dead baby. And so you'd watch this, and he would gauge the people's reactions watching it. And every single time he learned that he would show the picture of the loaf of bread and then cut to the shot of this neutral old man's face, and people watching would go, oh, he's hungry, look at the way he's looking at the bread. And then they would do another version where he cut to the dead baby and then cut to this man's with neutral expression. They go, oh, he looks so sad. And one of the things we learned was about juxtaposition, and those kind of things made a huge impression on me. It's not even necessarily what you shot and the story you're telling, how you're putting it together. It's what you cut to that provides a context, because people connect those things because you're connecting those things. And that's a lot of the magic of what we do in storytelling. The film language. So it's kind of hard for me to say. I only recently, managed to catch up with watching Jean-Luc Godard's Breathless. But, one of the things he did was he, in the French New Wave, figured out that you don't need to see everything to understand filmmaking, how it tells a story. It used to be you show like a man at home saying, honey, I've got to go to the office. And you see him walk out the door, and then you see him get into his car. And you see him drive for a while. And you see him get out of his car and go into the building and go up some stairs or an elevator and then walk into the office. Now you can literally just cut from somebody saying, I got to go to the office, and cut to him walking into the office. Those kind of things, there was a period in which people didn't understand that. It didn't make any sense of them. That's the film language, the way it evolves, and it all evolves through editing, because that's how things work. And to suddenly like show a scene in which something's happening as one thing, and there's tension, but if you suddenly cut in the middle of that scene, you cut to somebody in the shadows or a pair of eyes watching from the shadows, it changes the mood of the entire scene. So honestly, I'm not sure which film. Citizen Kane probably has some of the best, 1941, some of the best versions of those kind of things, where they were playing with the techniques of being able to cut to something. They did these shots where they cut to the shot of a screeching cockatoo in Citizen Kane, right as the very whiny mistress, who was a songstress or a songbird, if you will, was complaining in a very harsh voice to Charles Foster Kane, and they cut to a shot of this cockatoo screeching and flying up, and those kind of things are fascinating to me, that you can tell stories that way. So I don't know if that kind of answers it.
I tend to appreciate the invisible edit. Just there is sort of a rhythm to a scene or a rhythm to a conversation, and a good editor sort of is able to anticipate sort of a consensus reality. He's not going to be right for everybody, but he's going to sort of know when most audience members are, ooh, how is that person reacting to what this person just said? And so he knows that that's when the mind wants to switch view and see that other character. And that's always open to interpretation, but when it's done well, you'd be amazed at how many edits you simply miss, because the flow and the rhythm of it is right. But for that same reason, I'm going to point out one favorite edit of mine, and it's from Do the Right Thing, which was edited by Barry Brown, and it was the double kiss. Mookie, played by Spike Lee, comes in and basically kisses his girlfriend, and they immediately back up and do a double cut, comes in and kisses her again. And it breaks the rhythm completely, but it does such a good job of sort of highlighting that sweet moment. Like, this is worth noting. This is a good moment in what's happening right now. And then that's the first time I remember seeing something like that. I'm sure it probably came from another film, but that's when I noticed it. So by breaking the rhythm, you suddenly bring new information and a new sense of experience to what was already, or what to that point was straight linear reality as far as film editing was concerned.
Right.
So not so much an invisible edit, but it's emotionally smooth edit.
Yeah, it was,
and
the contrast of storytelling was perfect in that moment.
Yeah.
So
would because I'm kind of conflicted if it's a transition, which I guess also is an edit in a way, but I think of when we transition just to keep it in the Cameron bubble, when we transition from old Rose and the old footage of Titanic to 1912. That's almost that's a transition, but also an invisible edit, because he very well could have. I don't know what the other option would have been, but just that beautiful transition. And
well, you have the more traditional transition in the same movie. At the end, when old Rose, they cut to young Rose on the deck of the Carpathian, and she realizes she has the diamond in her pocket.
Right.
And it's a hard cut, and you're suddenly in the past. And it's the same mechanism. It's her memory that suddenly took you back 84 years or however many years it was. But it certainly wasn't flashy. And it wasn't what Jim wanted to do at that point. And for the first transition, he really wanted you to sort of peel away the present and enter through a portal into 1912.
Go into the screen, as the case was. Yeah.
And so that was an absolutely engineered transition. And there's editing involved, absolutely, but that's also mise en scène. That was directing, because everything about that was pre-planned to make that possible.
And of course, when she closes her eyes and remembers being there and Jack drawing her and everything, that's another incredible cut, honestly.
There was a transition that was in one of the deleted scenes, I think, that we worked on that for the 2005 Laserdisc Director's Cut edition that that had another much more normally flashy transition, which was pulling, going into her eye and then pulling back, morphing it from her eye to Kate's eye and pulling back out. But it was a little more forced because as I recall, Kate Winslet and Gloria Stewart had different eye colors. One was brown and one was blue.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So it became one of those things where, well, is this going to draw attention to the fact that they have different eye colors, for the characters? Yeah. So it's smooth transitions are one thing, but just the idea of being in the edit and going, why is this not working? The scene is everything we shot. It's exactly what we needed, but and then you go and you find, oh, I think I know what it is. And then they cut in a reaction shot, like I was saying, but you want to see what somebody's reacting, their reaction to this, what's developing in the scene. And you cut to this shot that you didn't shoot. It came for that scene. It came from some other scene. And it's like, well, if I color time it and I flop it and I, darken the background, a little bit, put it in there, all of a sudden it makes the scene work. Because it adds this other layer of tension or of foreshadowing or of something that suddenly, says, oh, somebody else was there when this was happening because they're seeing it, or something like that. And those kind of things are really, storytelling. It's the final rewrite, as they say. Editing is the final rewrite, because you can fix things that aren't working. You can plus things that are working but could work better. And in a lot of cases, you're able to seed in things. They do this in horror movies all the time, where you cut to some random shot just that's part of a crowd scene, and you show somebody walking by. And it's like, oh, okay, they're just showing there's a lot of people there. And then you realize at the end of the movie, that was the character that was stalking the character, and that they had been doing it since the beginning. And those kind of things where story turns on certain things is really, to me, one of the most fascinating things, because you can play with time and space in ways that you can't with just shooting things and doing it documentary style.
Right. The last thing I'll say is, if there's a film you're very familiar with, watch it and pay attention to exposition that is delivered from someone not speaking on camera. Like when you're in an over the shoulder and the person talking is the one that's off camera. Because oftentimes in the sound design, they use that off-camera dialogue to shore up story points that weren't necessarily clear, or they didn't want to take the time to highlight on camera. So you'll find that your perspective is being warped by just the information being delivered purely to your ears. And those characters aren't saying it on screen. They likely might have been recorded months after the fact as they reshaped the story and figured out what they needed.
Yeah, it's absolutely the case.
Well, look, I really appreciate both of you coming on and not reuniting, but that's what this will be. I'll title this as the reunion or something like that.
So Van, I'm on frame left, you're on frame right. Shall we do Wonder Twins activate?
Go ahead.
Give it a shot.
Other hand. Or maybe
yeah. No,
so
I have to go this way. So.
Oh, on my screen it's the other way. So
no,
Eddie,
Van, you go the other way.
I should go the other way?
Yes, there you go.
Ready? Here we go.
Okay.
Eddie, you have to add a big flash effect when we do this. You ready?
Okay.
3, 2, 1. Your hand disappeared, Van, but okay.
Yeah. See, I'm on the right. You're on the left on my screen.
Okay. All right.
We
tried.
We tried, and Van has that digital background that.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
Oh, it's all good.
It hides my true form, which is. That.
Thank you so much, and we'll do a formal goodbye. I'm just going to wrap it up here. Johnny Kindle, thank you for recommending doing this. This, I think, is hopefully going to become one of the favorite episodes of the podcast. Like I say at the end of every episode, go watch a Cameron film.